Welcome to the Krista Redpath Show, where sports take center stage and stories come to life. I'm your host, Krista, veteran analyst and passionate storyteller, bringing you weekly in-depth conversations and sharp analysis across the world of sports. The Krista Redpath Show, breaking down the game, elevating the story, and championing the female voice. To listen to the complete recording of this show, visit KristaRedpathMedia.com or download the Krista Redpath Show from your favorite podcast format. Today's show is proudly brought to you by Vertical Raise, the Big Sky Conference, Layered Cowley, and the Good Food Store. At the Good Food Store, they believe good food should be good for the planet too. That's why they launched their glass jar program, reusable, returnable jars for their house-made deli favorites. Here's how it works. Pick up your favorite deli item in a glass jar, pay a $2 deposit, and when you're done, bring it back clean. They'll refund your deposit, no hassle. Delicious food, less waste. It's that simple. Join the glass jar movement at the Good Food Store today.
Switching it up on the Krista Redpath Show this week, a post-Big Sky Tournament edition. I'm Andrew Houghton. You normally don't hear me on the show because I'm the editor who breaks down all of Krista's great interviews that you've been listening to all fall and winter here on the Krista Redpath Show. But switching it up this week because it's been a busy week for Krista Redpath, called all of the games up until the tournament final here at Big Sky in Boise, and then had to hustle back up to Montana for state basketball because you've got a son in his senior season in basketball and can't miss that. But we are joined here by Krista Redpath to lead off the show. We'll also hear from Colter Nuanez, the host of Nuanez Now on 102.9 ESPN Radio in Missoula, and we'll finish it up as we always do with Hall of Fame coach Carla C.T. Taylor joining me for a little Big Sky hoop hits after Idaho's 60-57 win over Montana State in the Big Sky title game. Vandals are back in the NCAA tournament for the first time since 2016, but we're kicking it off with myself, Andrew Houghton, joined by Krista Redpath for some analysis. First off, Krista, how was the tournament this week? You have such a busy time. I'm looking at you across the court doing color commentary for every single one of these games. How was it?
Andrew, first off, thanks. That was such an awesome intro. It's weird to be on the other side of this. So it's great to be asked these questions. I do think that is very busy, and you're definitely locked in to every team, and you're really trying to do your very best to really discuss these teams and call the games, but also give all the listeners and viewers information about all these teams, right? Because it's just been fun to have my show and to be so invested in the Big Sky Conference that I feel like this is a showcase for all of these teams. I do think that the way this tournament is set up, it's really fun as the color analyst progress with the tournament, because I really feel like you get to even be more involved and to see who is going to step up when the lights are bright.
No doubt. Before we even get to the championship game, right, we had some great stories in this tournament. Eastern Washington, super young team. They're the number 60. They had a great win over Northern Colorado in their first game. That's an upset. And then they take Montana State all the way to the wire to overtime in the semifinals. Really young team. How much confidence does that give you for Eastern Washington heading into next season, even though they didn't make it to the championship game?
I was so impressed with Coach Jody Gleason's Eags. I thought that they really brought their A game. Of course, they have one of the most prolific rebounders, second in the nation, in Courtney Grossman. They rely a lot on Elin Bowers and Ella Gallatin for offense, but I was so impressed with the play of JC Eggers. I thought she was an X factor for them and really stepped up big when they needed it. Overall, I feel like Eastern is the team that gave Montana State the biggest run all season. I mean, they took them to overtime, and then they ended up only losing to them by 2 points twice in the regular season. So I thought that was just such a great matchup. I'm kind of working backwards, but if you are Coach Gleason, you are so excited about the future of your program.
Yeah, it's 3 games for Eastern Washington against Montana State this season, 3 losses by exactly 2 points, including in overtime in the conference tournament. We should touch on the other semifinal loser, lost to Idaho, and gave the Vandals a close game. It was 59-51 for Idaho, but Aaron Kohlhoff and Sacramento State always seem to turn it on a little bit at the tournament. This is not the first year that they've won their first game at the tournament.
Well, and Coach Koloff talked a lot about that in terms of he is ready to go and he has his team just completely locked in for tournament play. Andrew, they have been through a lot this year. He had 12 different starting lineup rotations, different illnesses, and they had a scooter accident. They had all these crazy things where he felt like he finally had his core starters clicking and firing on all cylinders. And I do think that they really came to play against Idaho. And I was so impressed with the play of Benta Veersteeg and Natalie Picton and Fatu Jete. I also feel as if Ruby Gray was another player that had her moment. She's obviously the team's leading scorer, but a lot of bright spots for Aaron Koloff's Sac State Hornets.
And that just leads us to the two teams who did meet in the championship. Krista, what were your thoughts going into this championship game? I think it was the matchup that a lot of us wanted to see. Number one, Idaho. Number two, Montana State. Idaho's only loss in the conference season was to Montana State. One of Montana State's two losses in the conference regular season was to Idaho. And it was also, Trisha Binford's been in the league for 20 plus years. Arthur Moreira's in his second season with the Vandals. Great narratives going into this game. What were your thoughts going into today's game?
Well, it's really interesting, Andrew, because I felt like Idaho is the one team that can handle Montana State's pressure. And they've got that poise in Hope Hassman and Kira Gardner at the guard position. And so I thought it was just going to be an interesting chess match type of game because I know these two teams are so well coached and they're evenly matched. And they've got prolific, high caliber, high IQ basketball players. And so I was interested to see how this was going to work. Idaho is a very fundamental team. I feel as if they have it covered on both ends of the floor. Offensively, they're very poised. They pass and catch. They spread the floor. They make good decisions. Where I feel as if Montana State, they're a little bit more unpredictable on offense. They play great defense, but at times they go through maybe taking a good shot when they could take a great shot if they just made the extra pass. So I feel like that's one area of their game that could be exploited. So I wasn't sure though. Honestly, going in, Andrew, I thought whoever gets hot, takes care of the basketball and rebounds is going to be the team that prevails.
Yeah, and it was Idaho 60-57, but it wasn't easy for the Vandals. I mean, Idaho was up 11 at the start of the fourth quarter. Montana State turned up the pressure even more, which is crazy to say because they're full court pressing teams all game. This was a great crowd here in Boise. A lot of Montana State fans, a ton, of course, of Idaho fans, but the Montana State fans were turning up the volume in the arena. Idaho starts to make a few more bad turnovers. At one point, Montana State cuts it to one, but great defense from the Vandals on some possessions in the last minute of the game. Hope Hassman makes a few clutch free throws at the end of the game. What was the difference maker for you watching down the stretch that gave Idaho the title?
Well, I feel like Anna Pinheiro played incredible. So I do feel like she was an X factor in the game. She had 11 points, only 5 rebounds, but I feel like it was all strategic. And I feel like when she stepped up, she gave them just that extra push. But I feel like they made better decisions down the stretch. They were able to, I felt like Montana State hesitated. They were on their heels. They had open looks that they passed up. And I feel like some of the pressure coming into this tournament, Andrew, when you have an MVP type of player in Taylor Chiric, is Montana State looked like they were forcing things to her down the stretch, and it just wasn't there because Idaho was not allowing that to happen. And so I felt like at the end there, they really needed a couple more players to maybe step up and shoot, and it just wasn't happening for Montana State. And Idaho just took advantage of that.
How much of that is because, we saw a Montana State team with a lot of these same players win the tournament last year, but they had the senior in Esmeralda Morales, who, when the offense isn't working, is just able to put the team on her back and create the shot. And, Mara Dykstra could do a lot of that too. How much is that? It's just because it's such a young team this year and they didn't have anybody who'd really been in that situation before.
Well, I think you nailed it, Andrew. I think that's exactly what it is. I mean, Coach Binford has a very young team, not one senior. I think Jamison Phillip has done a fantastic job at the point for a freshman. I mean, she was playing in high school last year. So I do think there's some of that with experience, right? I think they grew up a lot in this championship game, and they are going to be in the mix for years to come if she can keep that roster somewhat together. Although Coach Binford has blown me away with how she just was able to bounce back this year after losing Esmeralda Morales and also a player like Mara Dijkstra to the transfer portal, which is just part of the trajectory of the game now in the mid-major or Big Sky Conference level, is coaches are going to build up these players and they are going to go and they might get offered more money. Side note. So I'm really impressed with Coach Binford for what she's done with this young group. And I think youth is what the difference was down the stretch. And Idaho just has those senior veteran, players in like a Kira Gardner. And Hope Hassman is a junior, but she's played a lot.
Yeah.
And Kira Gardner, the Washington State transfer, has flourished in Arthur Moreira's system. And she flourishes with that creativity, but she's also very smart. And she took care of the basketball when she needed to.
Absolutely. Only 2 turnovers for Hope Hassman today against that Montana State pressure defense. Again, Idaho wins it 60-57 over the Bobcats. They're going to the NCAA tournament. You have to think that a WNIT bid is on the way for Trisha Binford and the Bobcats. So I think there'll be at least 2 Big Sky teams headed into the postseason. You're listening to the Krista Redpath Show. We're switching it up a little bit this week. I'm Andrew Houghton, filling in as host for Krista Redpath. Krista's joining me as a guest this week. We'll also hear later in the show from Colter Nuanez and Carla C.T. Taylor, who's a regular guest here on the Krista Redpath Show. But Krista, 2 more for you. We have to look forward now to Idaho's path in the NCAA tournament. They've got 2 trophies. They've got the net around their necks. They've got a championship. They're going to have to go, and they're probably going to have to go play a Power 4 team on their home court. What do you think about just this team, their chances in the NCAA tournament next week?
Well, I really like this team a lot. And I think they have a lot of the different facets of their game. And we talked a lot about Kira Gardner and Hope Hassman, but we haven't really spent any time talking about Lorena Barbosa and Deb Dos Santos and that constant post presence and how they're able to match up. And they will be able to match up with Power 4 teams, given that height and athleticism. And there was something interesting in the tournament. I don't know if you noticed, Andrew, but Deb Dos Santos started a game and they made an error. They actually made an error with the book.
I asked Arthur Moreira about that right away in the post-game press conference because Lorena Barbosa is sitting on the bench waiting to be introduced, and she hops up and they say Deb Dos Santos' name, and then the game starts and it's Dos Santos out there in the center circle. And yeah, it's just you give the wrong lineup to the official scorer, and that's what you've got to go with. And Moreira says, I think one of my assistant coaches might be getting fired for that. And then he laughs it off and says, I'm just kidding. But they had to weather that. And Deb Dos Santos hasn't started a game this season. You think it's a small thing, but it really can throw you off.
Well, and yes, and it threw me off with calling the game because I thought, oh no, is Lorena Barbosa hurt? She went down with kind of an ankle sprain. And I thought, no, this is going to be a real issue. And so I digress from your question. I think that Idaho has the ability to compete. And I look at that post play, and I do feel like if you have that size along with strong guard play, you have a shot.
Absolutely. We'll see you on Selection Sunday. Again, this is an Idaho team with a great resume, 29 wins now, the most in program history. They're going to be hoping to get up to a 14 or maybe even a 13, but that still means you got to play somebody on their home court. So we'll be watching that. And we'll have some preview coverage, of course, of the Vandals NCAA tournament run next week on the Krista Redpath Show. And Krista, you mentioned John Newley there. And last one for you. It's been 10 years since Idaho has been in the tournament. They've been one of the top teams in the conference under John Newley for a lot of years, and he was there for a long time. But, I mean, you think back to 2016, and you think in the interim, I mean, this is a team that has been the number 1 seed in the Big Sky tournament and didn't even make it to the championship game in 2019 and 2020. They're in the championship game, and of course it gets called off with COVID-19 the night before they're supposed to play Montana State. The year after that, they're back in the championship game under John Newley, and that great Seton Sobolewski team at Idaho State just blows them out. So it's been a full decade for this team. What does it mean to the program that you, of course, as somebody following Big Sky basketball, have followed along for those 10 years?
Well, Andrew, you just took us all down memory lane because all of these tournaments mean so much to me, as this is my 12th tournament that I've called. And the first one I called was the last year of the regular season champion hosting. So that was the last year Montana had the host in 2014, 2015. That's when Idaho returned to the Big Sky Conference. So they were over in the WAC. And what was really neat about John Newley is he won the WAC, then he comes over, they have to sit out a year, and then he wins the Big Sky.
Yeah.
So that was really just an incredible run that John Newley had. So I want to give some credit to that. However, Idaho, when I look at them, they've played in 4 championships in the neutral site tournament, and the last one being obviously 2016 that they won. So this is such a big deal for them, and huge for them to do it under Arthur Moreira's watch of only his second year of being the head coach of Idaho. He had 1 year as the associate head coach under Carrie Amy that had a short stint. But yeah, just in 2 short years to be able to make that type of push and that type of run is so impressive. I will say, I thought Arthur Moreira for sure was going to be a great coach when he brought in a Kennedy Johnson, which, do you remember Kennedy and what a player she was? And that was under his watch. And so I feel like he had all the pieces. It was just him pulling the international pieces too in with his relationships within the U.S.
It's been a special ascent for Arthur Moreira here at the University of Idaho in his second year of Vandals, going back to the NCAA tournament for the first time since 2016. You're listening to the Krista Redpath Show, brought to you by the Big Sky Conference, Vertical Rays, Laird and Cowley, and the Good Food Store, where there's always something good here. Thanks to Krista for joining me, Andrew Houghton. We'll be back with more after this. We'll talk with Colter Nuanez, the host of Nuanez, now on 102.9 ESPN Radio in Missoula. We'll talk with Carla C.T. Taylor for Big Sky Hoop Hits to continue to break down this great win for the Vandals. But you'll be back with Krista Redpath next week hosting this show. Krista, thanks so much for joining me on your own show. It sounds so weird to say, but it's been great talking to you. Thanks so much.
Well, thank you, Andrew. And I want to give a shout out to you because you are making the show go behind the scenes. And I'm so thankful for you. And I just want everyone to know that I know we're reversed right now, but you're very much a part of the show. And I appreciate you a lot.
I appreciate that too, Krista. You're listening to the Krista Redpath Show. We'll be back with more right after this. Andrew Houghton filling in for Krista Redpath on the Krista Redpath Show this week. Normally the producer and editor behind the scenes, but Krista's had a busy week. She called all of the games before the championship game here at the Big Sky Tournament in Boise, and then had to get back to Montana to watch her son Evan play in the state basketball tournament. So hosting today, you did just hear Krista Redpath's analysis from the Big Sky Tournament, and now we bring in friend of the show, Colter Nuanez, host of Nuanez now on 102.9 ESPN Radio in Missoula. Colter, thanks for being here.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Hopefully Krista has good luck on her way back to Billings. Certainly been following along with AA and Hellgate all year long. I think that tournament is wide open. Thanks to you for having me. Thanks to Krista for letting us pinch hit. It's been a fun week here in Boise.
Idaho 60-57 winners over Montana State in the Big Sky title game just a few hours ago here on Wednesday afternoon. Colter, Arthur Moreira said it in the postgame. This program deserves this. They were one of the best teams in the Big Sky for part of that tenure, and since John Newley left, it's been a little bit of wandering in the wilderness for a couple of years, but Moreira in his second season brings this team back to the tournament. What did you think of just the job that the new Idaho coach has done?
Well, I thought when John Newley stepped away amid, controversy is not the right word, but sort of unrest, and the fact that he had been such a great coach at Idaho and had so much success, but then it started sort of eluding him a little bit, even though he's still able to bring in the best players in the conference, like Beyonce and some of those other players that Newley had late in his tenure. I think a lot of people wondered what Idaho would do. Then they brought in Carrie Amy, and she was fine, solid. But when she sort of abruptly left Idaho with no contract in hand and sort of dipped out to South Dakota, and they had to scramble, and they hired this assistant that nobody had ever heard of in Arthur Moreira, and this guy is left with a roster where he had literally 2 players and only one had ever even played in a game. You sit there thinking, they just cratered this thing. This is going to be like men's basketball where, Zach Klaus won 1 game his first year at the helm. Well, then last year, for the Vandals to even be an 18-win team was one of the big surprises in the conference. I don't think anybody saw that coming. Nobody saw this coming, though. To be able to build the roster like they did with a variety of players from all over the world. I mean, we've been joking, like, what language do they speak at practice? They have girls from Brazil. They have girls from all over Europe. They have girls that speak Portuguese, girls that speak Spanish. They have a bunch of girls from America. The fact is, though, he got that team to mesh together at one of the highest levels I've ever seen in somebody that's covered the Big Sky Conference for 20 years. And that was a brilliant coaching job for Arthur Moreira. The fact that this is the most basketball games an Idaho women's basketball team has ever won, pretty unbelievable. And they just beat a really talented Montana State team. So they absolutely deserve it. And I think they'll represent the Big Sky well. I think they're going to be a spunky, dangerous team headed into March Madness.
Right, because a lot of times we see these Big Sky teams in the NCAA tournament are competitive in everything except oftentimes it's the athleticism and the height. Well, this Idaho team has the two Brazilian posts holding it down, Barbosa and Debra Dos Santos. Dos Santos was on the Big Sky All-Tournament team. That sort of gives you a leg up when you're going to play, and they probably are going to have to play against a Power 4 team on their home court, but at least they're not completely outgunned.
I thought that was the biggest factor, too, in this Big Sky Tournament championship game was Idaho's ability, I guess, twofold. One, to break the press. I mean, it's funny the way that Montana State skews what you think of turnovers. Like 19 turnovers is a lot of turnovers in a game, and usually that's like a huge detriment to a team. Montana State forces almost 27 turnovers a game, so 19 is a great number. Like you are 8 turnovers less than what Montana State usually does. So that was one factor, but I thought the ability to protect the rim and to be tough on the block. Montana State has so many strengths, but their biggest weakness has been able to find shots in the half-court offense. They get by because they have such great penetrators like Jamison Phillip, the stud freshman point guard, Taylor Chiric, the league MVP. But when those young ladies would get downhill, there was just a brick wall waiting for them. And the combination of size that Idaho can have in the middle with Barbosa and Dos Santos is very, very impressive. The fact that Arthur Moreira just splits them straight down the middle. I mean, what they play today, yeah, I mean, Dos Santos played 23 minutes, Barbosa played 17 minutes. It was basically, like he said to you earlier this week, they're one player, right?
Yeah.
You're splitting the minutes for one position, but if you get 25 and 15 out of that position every night, that's pretty dang good. That gives them a chance, though, in the NCAA tournament because Barbosa's real deal 6'5". Dos Santos is listed at 6'1", but she is as sturdy and strong as they come. So usually, like you're saying, Big Sky teams can't hold up on the block. I think this Idaho team actually has a chance to hold up on the block a little bit.
Yeah, we'll see what seed they get. I doubt they'll get up to the 12 line, but a 13 or 14 in line for this Idaho team. Colter, you talked a little bit about just the defense that frustrated Montana State today. Arthur Moreira hit on this adjustment the second time that they played Montana State in the regular season, and that was a 73-70 overtime win in Moscow. It's basically, hey, we're going to put our center on generally Jamison Phillip, the point guard who's a great player for Montana State, but she struggles shooting from the outside. We're going to have our center guard, quote-unquote, Jamison Phillip, and just keep them in the post right under the basket, and so that when Taylor Chiric drives, when Phillip drives, when Addison Harris is trying to get something going in the post, they're essentially being double-teamed when they get into the paint. Worked really well today, held Montana State to 57 points. Bobcats shot just 35% from the field. What did you think of that, working so well for the second game in a row against Montana State? What did you think about the adjustments that Tricia Binford maybe made or didn't make?
Well, I mean, I thought that Idaho did a masterful job of exploiting the very few weaknesses that Montana State had. But that's the number one thing that Idaho takes is to get to that 12 seed line, you got to have a premier non-conference win. I don't know, the fact that Washington State wasn't that good this year does hurt them a little bit, but they do have a Power 4 win in their season debut.
And they're 29-5.
The 29 wins helps a lot. It also helps that you beat a team that won 25 games this year, and you beat them twice in the last month. Montana State's in the top 65 in the net right now, so their best wins are not out-of-conference wins. They're the conference. I mean, this conference championship game should help. But I thought here's the deal. Montana State, their only real weakness is they play this super solid point guard in Jamison Phillip, and they got so much great production from her, but she's not a great outside shooter. And they really don't have a great outside shooter other than Isabel Bunyan, but she can't really create her own shot. Idaho exploited that to the maximum, and I thought they did a really good job of it. They made Taylor Chiric work as well. Chiric is so good at getting downhill on everybody, but like you're saying, Andrew, when they put one of the centers on Phillip and that center can just float then in the middle of the lane, you almost get an automatic trap in the lane every time Chiric gets downhill on somebody. And so I thought Montana State's offense lacked a little rhythm, but that's not that uncommon. That was their biggest weakness this year. they make up for it because they get out in the passing lanes and they get so many steals. They didn't get as many as they're accustomed to. Let's say they force their season average of 26 turnovers, and let's say they even just get 8 or 10 points off of those. They win this game by 5 points instead of losing by 3. So I thought Idaho did an unbelievable job of mitigating their own weaknesses and maximizing the exploitation of Montana State's weaknesses.
That's exactly right? No matter what Montana State is or is not doing on offense, generally they're still going to win those games because they're going to get 25 turnovers. 10 of those are just going to be run-out steals for layups, or Taylor Cherrick just grabs the ball off the inbounds and lays it up. Idaho only has 19 turnovers, again, is pretty relative, but a good game for Idaho from that standpoint, and it's not letting the Bobcats jump the passing lanes and get free points off of it. Idaho point guard Hope Hassman named the tournament MVP after this game. Probably appropriate for what she did facing that pressure with the ball in her hands the whole time.
She was just rock solid the whole game. I'm really impressed with her as a competitor. I thought, the other thing is that Idaho, they have such a international flavor to their roster that doesn't always go with being tough. I thought they were the toughest team at this tournament all week long. I thought they showed that. Sac State wanted to get in just a straight backyard brawl, and Idaho was like, let's go. And they outlasted them in the semifinals. And then in this game, same deal. Montana State is so physical. They get all up in you with that press, and Hassman was not flustered at all. She did miss a couple key free throws, but she also hit a couple key free throws, and that was the thing that kept Montana State at bay. So I thought you could have given the tournament MVP to a variety of Vandals players, but Hassman certainly deserves it, and it's a cool story because she's sort of been the centerpiece of this whole thing, and then had a first-team all-conference senior year.
Colter Nuanez joining us here on the Krista Redpath Show. I'm Andrew Houghton, filling in for Krista this week. We'll be back right after this to talk to Carla C.T. Taylor for Big Sky Hoop Hits to wrap up the week's show. But Colter, I want to leave you with this. A couple of years ago, we ranked the 10 best Big Sky women's teams of the last decade or so. Since then, we've had a 30-win team last year in Montana State, a 29-win team this year in Idaho. Where do you put this Idaho Vandals team among some of the great teams that we've seen in the Big Sky over the last 10, 15 years?
It's a great question. I was thinking about that today. The first half of this championship game was if you're a basketball fan, amazing. Just up and down. The level of conditioning that was shown by both teams, just otherworldly, top-notch. And I was thinking to myself, how would these teams stack up? How would some of Tricia Binford's great teams from 10 years ago or so stack up? Or how would some of those John Newley teams like we talked about from Idaho, how would they stack up? Because those are, Tricia Binford's had groups that have been in the mix of this, sort of great teams of the last 10 years or whatever. And the number one thing I kept thinking about was the team that could be the greatest team in the history of the conference is the team that Montana State has right now in 2 years.
Yeah.
If they can keep everybody. I kept thinking, the Cats beat Colorado in the non-conference and then ripped through the first half of conference play, including killing Idaho and killing Montana. That sort of redefine their expectations. If you look at a Montana State team with no seniors, you'd think if they got to 20 wins and been, top 4 in the conference, that'd be a great year. You're ahead of schedule. You're going to run it back next year, all that. Well, they were in the mix for the conference title all the way until the last day of the regular season, and, they're the only team that's beaten Idaho in 2026, with the Vandals being on an 18-game winning streak since losing in Bozeman. So they sort of redefined their expectations, and they were certainly disappointed after the loss, but they have a bright future. I think a 25-win Montana State team should get a WNIT bid, but I think that Idaho team, because of their composure, but more than anything because of their head coach. I don't know if that's the greatest team I've seen in Big Sky history. It's the greatest coaching job I've ever seen. It's not close. And I don't know what the future is for Arthur Moreira. He has such an interesting demeanor and persona. I love it. I don't know if a lot of Power 5 ADs or Power 4 ADs will look at him and think that he could be the guy to be the man. He's one of the most masterful in-game coaches I've ever seen in the Big Sky Conference, men or women. So he, to me, gets the greatest coaching job I've ever seen in the Big Sky. But I do think that Idaho team would stack up. They have to be in the top half of that top 10, certainly, because 29 wins doesn't lie, especially with the momentum they take into the NCAA tournament.
I absolutely agree with you. Just 2 years for Arthur Moreira at Idaho, and he's won 29 games, and he's taken the Vandals to the NCAA tournament. Thanks to Colter Nuanez for joining us here on the Krista Redpath Show. We'll be back right after this for Big Sky Hoop Hits with Carla C.T. Taylor. You're listening to the Krista Redpath Show. Andrew Houghton filling in for Krista Redpath on the Krista Redpath Show this week, and it's time for one of our favorite segments, Big Sky Hoop Hits, with former Weber State head coach, Wildcats Hall of Famer Carla C.T. Taylor. Carla's been busy this week in Boise, holding it down on the courtside show, sitting courtside for the Big Sky tournament here. First off, Carla, what was that like? How's it been sitting courtside in Boise?
Oh, it's been awesome. 5 days of just incredible basketball, from the games on Saturday clear through the championship. You just see such an improvement at the level of all the teams, and just great basketball, competitive basketball.
No doubt. We had a great championship game today, just a few minutes ago, actually. They wrapped up the press conference here, so this is fresh analysis coming to you. But some really great games early in the tournament as well. Montana State and Eastern Washington, what a game. Before we get to this championship game, which of these teams coming in here has surprised you? Who stood out to you maybe that didn't make the championship game?
Well, I felt like Sacramento State could be a dark horse. They were up and down the season. I know they had some injuries, some illnesses, some freak accidents, and they just were inconsistent. But man, they came in, and their first game looked like a seasoned team ready to play in a tournament. Eastern Washington, same thing. They looked good. Surprising win over Northern Colorado, that Northern Colorado comes in with only 5 losses in conference. And the second half, Northern Colorado not able to take advantage of a red-hot second-half team in Eastern Washington. So just great play by the semifinal games were incredible. So you have Eastern Washington, Montana State, and it comes down to the wire. And Montana State's down by 3 with like 20 seconds left to go. They run it around the horn, try to get a shot for Addison Harrison. She can't get the shot off. She kicks it to the freshman, who launches, and I mean launches a rainbow 3 and drains it, and the game goes into overtime. And it could have gone either way. I mean, 1 in 100 times you make that, 99 times you maybe don't. But great overtime play by Montana State. They come out with the win. So you have number 1, number 2 playing in the championship game. You couldn't script it any better, right?
No, yeah, absolutely couldn't. We'll get to the championship game, but let's remember that Eastern Washington Montana State semifinal for just a minute more here. Incredible shot by Breanne Bailey, who's a freshman, to tie it for Montana State. But if you're Eastern Washington, right, you win to get into the semis, and then to play the number 2 team in the conference that well. And this is a team also. It's the freshman Elin Bowers. It's the sophomore J.C. Eggers. Katie Gingras, who I think is also a sophomore, hit some really big shots in those couple games. What does that do for you going into next season if you're able to keep all those players?
Yeah, that's the big if with everybody. Eastern Washington was so impressive in the tournament. You know, they got that little freshman point guard, and from Pinedale, Wyoming, and she's a little spitfire. I mean, she took it to the hole against the Bobcats. I mean, she just got to the rim, and she broke the press, and they struggled against the press against Montana State at first. Yep. But then the second half, she just got to the rim, goes 1-on-3 and scores.
Not scared of the pressure, not scared of the moment. I mean, 23 points in that game.
Right, and you know, J.C. Eggers was big in both games inside the post. She's just a sophomore. So I think Eastern Washington has a bright future, no question. Coach Gleason has done a great job recruiting, and I think she'll do the same. And I like to see when these coaches are able to get talented freshmen that come in and just not depending completely on the transfer portal. And then, I mean, I love Courtney Grossman. I mean, just a phenomenal rebounder. She had 2 games this season, 22 boards, 23 boards. Who does that? I mean, that's a stat that to me is just out of this world.
Particularly a player who's listed at six foot, but maybe is not quite 6 feet tall.
Yeah, she's 6 foot if she has some platforms on. But no, I love Courtney Grossman, and the way she plays. She hit some threes in the game against Montana State, and yes, she had a hard time inside against the tall players, the height and the length of Montana State. But it was a battle. It was a battle inside the paint, that was for sure.
Carla C.T. Taylor, former Weber State head coach, Weber State Hall of Famer, and a Big Sky analyst, joining us here for Big Sky Hoop Hits post-Big Sky Tournament edition, just about an hour and change after Idaho won the Big Sky Tournament for the first time since 2016 with a 60-57 win over Montana State. Carla, let's talk about that game a little bit. Idaho had this one in the bag. They were up 11 early in the fourth quarter. Montana State turns the pressure on, comes almost all the way back, cuts it to 1 point late in the game. But it's Idaho who puts it away, and Arthur Moreira, in his second season as head coach, has taken the Vandals to the NCAA tournament. You were sitting there courtside. What was the difference for you in this game? What did you see?
Oh, man, I felt like going into the game, the difference would be who wins in the paint. And at halftime, it was 24-2, I think, in the paint for Idaho.
Finished 34-12 points in the paint,
Yes.
The advantage for Idaho, which is a staggering advantage in a game that you only win by 3.
Right, and a lot of that was Idaho's defense not allowing Chiric to get to the rim, which she is so Taylor Chiric. If she can get in deep in the paint, she can take you one way, wheel the other, and elevate and score. And they weren't allowing her to do that because he had his big post player parked in the paint, defending the point guard, and everybody else playing man. And but I will say, Montana State shot the ball well from the three-point line, especially in the first half. They had 6 threes, and they looked comfortable shooting the three. And they don't always look comfortable shooting the three, but they did this first half. The second half, they still made some. I think Izzy Bunyan made one.
Ella Johnson made one late, a big three-pointer late.
Yes, big threes by the junior post players that are stepping out and shooting the three, right? But for Montana State, Idaho did a good job of clogging up the paint, not allowing them to get to the rim. But then I'm telling you, the same thing happened on the other end. If Idaho drove too deep, it was a tie-up. I mean, they just collapsed, and there was nowhere for them to even pass. So I just thought it was just great performances by both teams on the defensive end, and that game could have gone either way. It wasn't sealed up until the buzzer went off.
Yeah, it's a great description of the game, the intensity, the energy, the physicality on both sides. I think it was really worthy of a 1v2 matchup. It was on a razor's edge either way. Carla, I wanted to ask you now, looking forward for this Montana State team first. They went to the Big Sky title game a year ago. They won it at the last second. They go to the Big Sky title game this year. They lose it. They had a chance to tie it in the last second, but back-to-back appearances in the Big Sky title game. And like Eastern Washington, this is a very, very young team. Taylor Chiric and Addison Harris are both sophomores. Breanne Bailey, who hit the big shot against Eastern Washington, just a freshman. Where does Trisha Binford take this team from here?
Well, I'm sure Coach Binford is just, it's like she said, you have to re-recruit your team every year, because if you have great players, people are trying to poach them, right? And with the transfer portal, and I hope that those Montana State players stay, and become like a Taylor Chiric, become a legacy player for Montana State. You can go somewhere else bigger, and you can go somewhere for money, but you'll never have the experience of staying at a school for 4 years with a crowd. I wanted to mention that on air. The average attendance at home games, 2,400, and that's a tribute to Coach Binford, her staff, her players, and the city of Bozeman to come out and support this team like they have. And they traveled. They were here in the stands tonight, as well as a huge crowd for Idaho. It was one of the most fun championship games I've been a part of how loud it was. But I hope Coach Binford can keep those kids, and they understand there's more to your college experience than money, even though it all looks good. Getting an education is important, and then staying as a legacy player at the university that you started at.
Particularly for a player like Taylor Chiric, of course, a Montana native from the Billings area, went to Roberts High School. Carla C.T. Taylor joining us here for Big Sky Hoop Hits on the Krista Redpath Show. I'm Andrew Houghton, filling in for Krista Redpath this week. Krista had a busy week doing color commentary on all the games here at the Big Sky Tournament up until the final, and she had to get back to Montana. Her son, Evan Pyron, playing in the state basketball tournament. So filling in for Krista. CT, we'll finish up for you. What's next for this Idaho team? I mean, they're projected a 13, a 14 seed. I think they probably are not going to be able to climb up to be a 12 seed, so you're probably going on the road to play somebody at their home gym. How do you prepare for that if you're Arthur Moreira?
You know, at this point, you're just so relieved to accomplish the goals that you set at the beginning of the season. And, you know, it was a big deal for them. They wanted to win the regular season, and the target was on their back from the time they split with Montana State. So targets on their back, they were able to accomplish that. And we talked to him in the after the semifinal win, and I know Meg asked him, what does this win mean? He says, it means nothing if we don't win tomorrow night, because our goal is to win the tournament championship and go to the NCAAs. And speaking from experience, it's difficult to do. I mean, Coach Benford has done it 3 times in her 21 years. It's hard. I mean, it's hard to get over that hump, get there, and then to get your kids playing their best basketball at the end in the tournament. So I think, you know, he loses 8 seniors, but I think he's an incredible recruiter, which is obvious of what he brought in. I think he had the 24th best recruiting transfer team in the country. That says a lot. And he has an international connection that he's going to be able to get some more international players. The future's bright for Idaho, but I think Montana State, after this tournament going into next year, is the preseason number 1.
Well, we'll be talking about that this fall with Carla C.T. Taylor on the Krista Redpath Show. She's joined us all season long for Big Sky Hoop Hits. Carla, I'm sure we'll talk to you over the summer as well here on the Krista Redpath Show. But for Krista Redpath, just want to say thank you so much for your time, for the insight this year. It's been great having you.
Well, thank you. You know, as I say to Krista, I'm happy to talk, and I love what Krista has done with this show, and you too, Andrew, as the producer and the editor, because I know sometimes you have to edit me, and you know, I always say you never know what's going to come out of my mouth, but I do love talking basketball, and it's the Big Sky. The women's basketball just continues to get better and better every year, and it's fun to be a part of it.
Well, it's been a pleasure. Thanks, CT.
Thank you.
Thanks so much to Krista Redpath, Colter Nuanez, Carla C.T. Taylor for joining us this week on the Krista Redpath Show. The show this week is brought to you by the Big Sky Conference, Vertical Rays, Laird and Cowley, and the Good Food Store. Krista Redpath will be back hosting next week with a look at the Idaho Vandals and their NCAA tournament berth and the chances for an upset.